MarkRogersTV back with you. I just took in the second half of the Washington State-Rutgers game. The Scarlet Knights in their first game as a Big Ten conference member. They go out to the West Coast. They jump out on Washington State early at 14-3. They also led 21-10, so they had an 11-point lead. But between about halfway through the second quarter into the fourth quarter, Washington State looked like the superior football team. The passing attack could not be stopped. Connor Halliday's closing numbers in this one: 40-56, 532 yards, five touchdowns, and he threw one interception that early in the football game. Washington State, of course, as is their MO, they couldn't run the football. They didn't even try to run the ball. They ran it 14 times technically, but didn't even really hand it to a running back 14 times for 6 yards. And that lack of balance on offense and the lack of run support on defense really cost the Cougars in this football game, because like I say, late first quarter into the fourth quarter, Washington State looked like the superior football team. It looked like Rutgers could not stop the passing attack of Halliday and company. But in the fourth quarter, the key play, trailing 38-34, Rutgers punting back to Washington State. Again, not being able to stop Washington State, who had scored 4 consecutive touchdowns. Rutgers punts away to Washington State, trailing 38-34, 7.5 minutes left in the game. So the Cougars would get the ball and be able to go to a two-score lead. What happened instead was there was a fumbled punt. Big play. River Craycraft, the sophomore wide receiver who caught 46 passes last season for Washington State, 3 touchdowns. So a major contributor to this football team. Fumbles the punt at midfield. Rutgers recovers. They go on a lengthy drive, about as lengthy as you can, playing with just half the field. Paul James scores again for Rutgers. He was the main offensive weapon for the Scarlet Knights on this night. And Rutgers hangs on for the victory. They actually shut down Washington State the final few possessions. And to the Scarlet Knights' credit, after being ripped apart in the secondary and not being able to get enough pressure on quarterback Connor Halliday, only gave up 7 points in the fourth quarter, stopped the last 2 drives, and the final Connor Halliday pass fell incomplete at midfield with 53 seconds left to play. So Rutgers wins a huge game as an 8.5-point underdog on the road, traveling all the way to the West Coast, something it could not complete despite scoring 52 points last season and going to Fresno State on the opening weekend, losing 55-52 in overtime. This time, Rutgers pulls off the victory. Again, a bit of a surprise as Washington State dominated the game in falling behind 21-10, then going on a 21-3 run to take a 7-point lead at 31-24. Rutgers hangs in there on defense. They give the ball enough to Paul James on offense, who was an all-conference performer in the American Athletic Conference for Rutgers and gaining almost 900 yards and 9 rushing touchdowns last season, and he's off to an even better start than that. 29 carries, 173 yards, and 2 scores for Paul James, and he scored the game winner again with about 3.5 minutes left to play, and Washington State could not get it past midfield as, again, the passing attack looked unstoppable with, in particular, Vince Mahle, all Pac-12 conference performer at wide receiver, catching 12 for $124 and a touchdown. And Isiah Myers, 6 catches, 94 yards, and 2 touchdowns, as it was actually 4 wide receivers for Washington State caught more than 80 receiving yards in this game, as Washington State could not be stopped until it mattered in the fourth quarter. Rutgers stayed just close enough. Then they pulled off the victory. A huge win for Gary Nova and company, as Nova, the much-maligned Rutgers starting quarterback, hit on a 78-yard touchdown pass on the first play from scrimmage, and then he went cold, but he hit on enough throws, 16 of 27, as you saw the difference in approaches. Of course, the Scarlet Knights with a big offensive line and James in the backfield only threw it 27 times compared to 56 for Washington State, as Mike Leach continues to refuse to run the football or even try to run the ball at Washington State. But if his program, wherever he goes, Texas Tech, Washington State, truly want to play with the elite in that conference, they've got to start to learn to man up and stop the run and man up and provide a rushing offense that can at least keep the defense honest, especially inside the 10-yard line where that Washington State offense has issues pushing the ball into the end zone. Not in the second and third quarters, but in the first and fourth quarters, especially in the first quarter. A couple drives inside the 10 stalled. They missed a field goal. They had to resort to a field goal because they could not run the ball. Again, 14 rushing attempts for Washington State, 6 rushing yards. So Rutgers, it could be a rough ride in the Big Ten, but for now they go to the West Coast and they defeat a pretty solid Pac-12 team that went to a bowl game and going 6-7 last season in Washington State. For the Cougars, we just previewed their schedule just a few days ago here on Mark Rogers TV. We expected this to be a win. We gave it about a 60% chance of a winning probability for Washington State, but they can't get it done playing in the Seattle Seahawks home park at CenturyLink. And they will not do that anymore, as their athletic director has said. We want all our games to be on campus going forward. So Rutgers comes back to defeat Washington State 41-38. Would love to hear from Big Ten fans, Pac-12 fans on this one right here on Mark Rogers TV.